As promised, the opposition is here live in studio to react. We've got the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives, Melissa Lantsman, alongside Gord Johns. He's the NDP critic for mental health and harm reduction. Hello to you both. Thank you very much for making the time. Ms. Lantsman, I'm going to start with you. I understand the concerns your party is raising around the issue of drug policy, but to what we just heard from Minister McKinnon, how is it at all necessary to call the Prime Minister wacko to make your point? And isn't it unparliamentary?
Look, it is wacko to see children in playgrounds stepping over needles. It is wacko to see 2,500 people a year die from the dangerous drug policies by this dangerous Prime Minister who's keeping them in place even after the radical NDP in BC has asked him to reverse those dangerous policies. All of those things are wacko, and I think Canadians agree that this is wacko policy.
Okay, but to address the substance of my question, you didn't just, the leader of your party didn't just label the content of the policy as wacko. He said that the Prime Minister was wacko. Why is it necessary to employ that kind of characterization or language when you're well aware that it does go against the rules of Parliament to make a point about concerns around a policy? Does it not degrade the sort of decorum of politics?
We want to have the conversation about policy, about the dangerous drug policy that, again, has killed 2,500 people, that kills 6 people a day. And we're going to call it exactly what it is, what Canadians believe that it is. And we want to see the Prime Minister make a reversal on it. That's what we were arguing. That's what we will continue to argue. And these are wacko policies. And it is a word that has been used in the House of Commons many times. In fact, by the leader of the House Leader of the NDP, who can't be here because he's used that word.
No, well, he could be here, but he's used the word. But again, not to describe the Prime Minister. And you heard the way that Minister McKinnon was essentially aligning your party's willingness to do that in the House of Commons with things like stopping at the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick border and speaking with anti-carbon tax protesters who also happen to have F. Trudeau flags there and also happen to have a diagolon symbol on the structures they were in. Do they not have a point in raising those criticisms?
Look, the leader is going to stop at an anti-carbon tax rally because he is the only leader in the House that is anti-carbon tax, and we will continue to fight againt the carbon tax for every single Canadian. He has denounced those protesters 2 years ago, the group that you talk about, when they threatened his family and they threatened his wife. Now, we're not going to stop fighting against the carbon tax in Canadians. We're not going to stop fighting in the House of Commons to reverse these dangerous and insane drug policies that even the BC NDP, even Oregon, this is the only place in North America that has decriminalized crack, fentanyl, heroin. That's the conversation that we're going to have with Canadians, and that's the conversation we want to have in the House with these wacko policies that we will continue to point out.
And I do want to get to the debate around that policy because I think it's an important one to have. But while you say yes, in reference to the comments that were made about Mr. Poilievre's wife, he did denounce diagolon at the time. He didn't say anything about this protest and the presence of the symbol there. And he also hasn't said anything about Alex Jones endorsing him. Why not?
We're going to have look, if you want to have a conversation about the House of Commons and what we talked about today and the fact that the Liberal Speaker is protecting the Prime Minister while silencing the Leader of the Opposition, we're happy to do that. If you want to talk about a Prime Minister who drives division and hate, who has been thanked by Hamas, who doesn't list the IRGC as terrorists, we can have that conversation.
I mean, I've talked to the Liberals about all that too,
but today we were having a conversation in the House about the dangerous drug policies that the Prime Minister has imposed on Canadians that have allowed 6 people to die a day. That is a crisis, and it is a crisis that the Prime Minister still hasn't addressed.
So I take it from those comments that you don't regret employing the word wacko to describe the Prime Minister?
They are wacko policies,
But you're not addressing the substance. It's wacko policies versus calling the Prime Minister wacko. Those are two different things.
Employed by a wacko Prime Minister.
Do you really think it's okay to use that language to describe him, regardless of what you think about his policies? Like,
I want to see a speaker that's going to apply the rules equally in the House. And if the Prime Minister wants to call the Leader of the Opposition names, then we are going to talk about the wacko policies that this Prime Minister has imposed and the death of 2,500 British Columbians, 6 people a day dying from his dangerous drug policies.
Mr. Johns, I want to bring you into the conversation and get your perspective because Ms. Lantsman brought up the fact that that word wacko has been employed twice by Peter Julian. In different contexts, he described some claims by the Conservatives back in June of 2022 as wacko. He also described a comment about Bill C-11 as wacko in the House of Commons. Do you feel that it was necessary for the Speaker to eject Mr. Poilievre based on what he said today?
I think that what we saw today was what we're seeing every day from the Conservative Party. They continue to dog whistle, to come on the attack. Right now, we see both the Liberals, whether it be the Prime Minister Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre, continue down the path of division. It's not what Canadians need right now. They need hope, not fear. They need compassion, not this attitude right now that is causing so much division. And we need solidarity right now. And that's what New Democrats and Jagmeet Singh, and that's what we're trying to do. Look, we know that the leader of the Conservative Party, he stopped. He met with people that were our participants and partners with Diagolon. The same leader, the Conservative Party leader, and back to what's happening in terms of the toxic drug crisis, he refuses to meet with Mom Stop the Harm. He's the only leader in the country that refuses to meet the victims of this toxic drug crisis, who have a lot of advice to offer.
But do you understand, Mr. Johns, some of the criticisms or the concerns that they are raising around decriminalization? And I understand, in theory, the way it should work, but I also understand a lot of people who are concerned by the stories coming from nurses, for example, at hospitals where this was happening in the open. I understand the concern from parents who were in playgrounds and saw this happening as well. Like, are those concerns not valid to raise alongside, of course, concern for the people who are falling victim to this crisis?
Absolutely. And so we heard from the president of the Police Chiefs Association of British Columbia, and they were unequivocally clear that they were asking for tools to be able to move people along and in extraordinary situations actually arrest people. But they were absolute, and that they don't want to go back to criminalizing people. They said those days are gone. They said that on record at Health Committee. They actually...
But they also talked about needing tools, and many other municipal leaders talked about this as well, needing tools to ensure that that drug use is not happening in public spaces like hospitals, like playgrounds.
So that was the adjustment. That was the amendment that they wanted, to be able to have those tools, to be able to move people along. But they're also clear in that they don't want less safe consumption sites. They want more. They also made it clear that diversion of safer supply, despite the disinformation from the Conservatives, is not killing people, but deadly fentanyl. And they're absolute in that we need to scale up the response to this crisis. So we have treatment on demand, recovery, prevention, and education. And let's look at other jurisdictions. Alberta's numbers are skyrocketing. They've got, overdose deaths have gone up 17%. In Saskatchewan, 23%. Just north of us in Alaska, they've gone up 45%. They don't have decrim. They don't have safe supply. They're not investing in harm reduction.
Why is it extremist to raise those concerns about decriminalization writ large? Like, the way that you're characterizing the concerns as espoused by the Conservatives are that they are extreme.
I think that what is happening right now is we're not seeing a full-scale response to the toxic drug crisis. So we need a full throttle response from the government. We've invested 1% of what we spent on COVID, despite the fact this is the leading cause of death of anyone under 59 years old in my home province. We have not seen a full-scale response. We gave decrim 18 months. And again, back to the police chiefs and what they were saying. They were saying, we need tools to move people along. We do not want to criminalize people anymore. And so the Conservatives continue to try to spread disinformation about safer supply, spread disinformation about the need for safer consumption sites. They want to continue to point the finger at their policies in Alberta when they're failing drastically. In fact, Alberta, by June, will have more deaths per capita, likely, if they continue the trajectory they're on than British Columbia.
I just have time for, I'm already way over. Everyone in the control room is telling me, so I just want to make sure I get both of you. And look, like I said, I understand why you're raising those concerns. Can you do it, Ms. Lantsman, without calling the Prime Minister wacko? And do you concede that that kind of is informing a way of doing politics that may not be the most productive, if in fact what you want is for policy to change?
I think we have one of the most divisive prime ministers in history. But I will say this will go down. The dangerous drug policy of the Liberals will go down in history as one of the most insane policies in the history of this country, with 2,500 people dying with needles in parks, with open use in hospitals and buses. Even the
How do you address those numbers in Alberta, though?
Even the radical NDP Gord's premier in his province has demanded that the Prime Minister reverse this radical ideological policy. That's what we want to see done. We want to see treatment so that we can bring our addicts home, or those who are afflicted by addiction home drug-free. That's what we will continue fighting for in the House every single day.
Does there need to be some concession among those who advocate for decriminalization, Mr. Johns, that a focus on treatment, in conjunction, not at the exclusion of, is not necessarily a bad thing?
We've always been clear that we apply what was set out by the Expert Task Force on Substance Use, which included police chiefs, experts on substance use policy, people with lived and living experience. They made it clear. They wanted the government to implement a policy of safer supply, to stop criminalizing people who use substances because it causes more harm, to have treatment on demand, to make sure people get the help they need when they want it, invest heavily in recovery, prevention, and education. We have not seen the federal government scale up in any of those areas. They have not treated this like a public health emergency, and they need to.
Okay, I have to leave it on that note. Thank you very much, both of you, for making the time for the conversation. Melissa Lantsman, the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives, and Gord Johns, the NDP's critic for mental health and harm reduction.